Hello and welcome to Africa Here and Now, the conversation you've always wanted to have about the continent. I'm Martine Dennis. This is the year of elections. They're happening all over the continent. We look at Mozambique's and we cast forward to Botswana's. Why does nobody, not the UN or the African Union, recognise Somaliland, the breakaway state that's in the eye of the storm as tension mounts in the Horn? Plus, has anyone seen President Paul Biya? Rumours of his demise went viral recently, and Cameroonians were banned from discussing their 91-year-old leader's health. But we can. And why did the legendary ape-man Tarzan have no African friends, despite supposedly growing up in an African jungle? A new podcast dissects the way Africans are portrayed by Hollywood. Right, now I would have liked to introduce you as ever to Donu Kogbara, our Nigerian writer and broadcaster, but she's got internet problems. She's in Abuja, so what else? But Patrick is here, our roving Patrick Smith, who's editor of Africa Confidential. And Patrick, you've rocked up in Gaberone in Botswana, which is generally thought of as what, the Switzerland of Africa. What's going on? What's taking you to Gabs?
About an hour ago, I was talking to a woman called Sheila Karma, who used to run the diamond mining industry here. And it was one of the best run diamond industries in the world. They were in a partnership with De Beers. They'd managed to get sort of half a stake in Botswana, the local diamond producing company. They were doing their own cutting and polishing of diamonds. And it was all going very well. The problem is that the diamond industry globally is in a mess. So Botswana's income is shrinking as a result of that. Added to that, the owners of De Beers, Anglo-American in South Africa, now want to sell De Beers. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what the future is, who might buy De Beers and who might Botswana be forced to partner with. So against that backdrop of economic uncertainty, you've got these elections coming up on the 30th of October. And I think, certainly without exaggeration, they're probably going to be the most fiercely contested elections ever in Botswana, because the incumbent party, the Botswana Democratic Party, has been in power since 1966, and it now faces a range of very impressive contenders challenging that supremacy. So that's coming up on the 30th of October.
So President Masisi, he better watch out then, hadn't he? Has that well-publicised falling out between him and his former mentor, former President Ian Khama, has that had much of an impact on the political landscape as they get ready for these elections?
It has, in terms of the news headlines. We all like a great scandal and story. And, Khama was found with this cache of arms. And he says, well, as a former soldier, I have every right to have a cache of arms. It's like telling a journalist to surrender his laptop. It's part of who I am. So I'm entitled to that. But Masisi was accusing him of trying to foment an insurrection, mount a coup, etc., etc. So there was a real falling out. But Ian Khama himself maybe has a chance of winning in these elections. He's around, he's campaigning here. Maybe 5 seats out of the 61 seats in contestation. So mathematically, his role is not critical. It's sort of important, but it's not critical. But it's a sort of, it's a headline symbol. And the one thing about Khama is that he wasn't very popular by the time he'd finished his second term. And people say that the opposition would have won in 2019 if he hadn't decided to join them. And when they said, when it was clear that Khama was joining the opposition, they said, well, we'll stick with the devil we know, which is Masisi. So they voted for Masisi. Now Khama has got his own party separate from the other opposition.
All right, but it seems very much, this is the year of elections, isn't it? But it seems very much as though incumbent parties, those parties that have been occupying positions of power since independence, they all need to watch out, because the tide is turning, and the tide is being turned, isn't it, by this vast youth demographic that is affecting the entire continent.
Yeah. It presses all the buttons here in Botswana. You've got, like Nigeria, actually. I wish Donu's internet would hurry up, because it would be great to compare Nigeria, weirdly enough, with Botswana. Because like Nigeria, Botswana is a single commodity economy. Essentially, it's all about diamonds. And until pretty recently, the diamonds have been managed really well. But it's the single most important source of state revenue, and the politicians control and manage it. And as we've seen, when the politicians control and managed oil in Nigeria, ended in a bit of a disaster. And that's what we're now seeing happening in Botswana, or at least the risks of that happening in Botswana, and undoing all that good work in the past.
And diversification is quite a lengthy process, isn't it? Which we know that is underway, but yeah, as I say, it takes time. Can you just give us a really quick word on what the hell is going on in Mozambique? Because again, Frelimo, the Party of Liberation, they've really got some worries, haven't they?
Yeah, they have exactly the same pattern. You've got, like Botswana, like Nigeria, like Mozambique, you see this swelling of the youth vote, that is the under 30s. They're 70% of the people in Mozambique, and they're frustrated, particularly in the urban areas where unemployment is going up, job opportunities are shrinking, and state revenues are sort of steady or declining right now. The difference in Mozambique is that there is a major gas project in the north of the country, in Cabo Delgado province. That's $50 billion about to go into a gas project. So for both the opposition and the incumbents, Frelimo, who have been in power in Mozambique since 1975, the stakes could not be higher. I mean, $50 billion sharing that, the largesse around that investment is going to be critical. And now the opposition are accusing Frelimo of having fixed the elections that took place last week, 9th of October, and they're shilly-shallying about the results. And even the very diplomatic, and some would say over-diplomatic European Union observers are saying, well, at least show us the results from each of the polling stations so we can check the arithmetic, because we're a bit suspicious that you may be changing those results. But it comes down to this issue of whatever you think about electoral democracy and the virtues of it. If you're asking people to vote and you don't respect their vote, which is what's happening in many countries around the world, then people are going to hold you in the same contempt that you hold them. And that's a recipe for political chaos and conflict.
Oh, and on that cheery note, that ends our election roundup for this show. Now, the breakaway Republic of Somaliland has been called a haven of peace in a rough neighbourhood that's pretty much getting rougher by the month. The prospect of armed conflict is never that far away. Now, despite having its own military, its currency, passports, universities, its own court system, and having held a string of democratic elections, Somaliland isn't recognised by the international community. It's regarded still as part of Somalia. So how far can Somaliland go without official recognition? Well, that's a question for our guest, Professor Eid Ali Ahmed, a senior advisor to the Somaliland government in Hargeisa, from where he joins us now. Thanks for talking to us, Professor. How are you doing?
Oh, fine. Thank you very much, Martini.
How does Somaliland actually function? I mean, do you have a system of taxation? I presume you rely a lot on remittances from abroad.
Yes, yeah, we rely a lot from the remittance, from abroad, the Somaliland diaspora, but also we have, a flourishing, trade. It's Somalilanders, they are entrepreneurs, or Somalis, they are entrepreneurs. And, we have a lot of, business people who, import, different goods from, different parts of the world, and then they export that, to Ethiopia, even to Somalia. And when you look, Somaliland, how they survived, a country that was destroyed completely, and about more than 100,000 were killed, and over 2 million, were displaced, and they were refugees in Ethiopia and other parts of the world, like Djibouti or even UK. And when the SNM win 1991, there wasn't any institution functioning. There wasn't any income. But in fact, I can say, and me as an entrepreneur as well, because of their creativity, Somalilanders, they survived. And particularly women, I can say, they did a lot, and it is written, and there is research. I and two professors from Cardiff University, we did in Somaliland 2018. And that one was looking the small, informal trade in Somaliland. And it was beginning from 1991.
I'm getting virtually everybody commends Somaliland for the amazing reconstruction and the amazing commitment that Somalilanders have had to rebuilding their country, as you say, after that terrible, terrible devastation. It was called the Dresden of Africa, wasn't it? Hargeisa. So everybody, I think, appreciates that. It's been described as a haven of peace in a fairly troubled neighborhood. But the interesting thing, really, for me, is how does Somaliland see its future, given that it's not recognized by anyone, and it seems to be hanging on a thread for this memorandum of understanding, this MOU that was signed with the Ethiopians?
I was a consultant and advisor to the Somali government. The National Development Plan of Somaliland for 7 years. And with that National Development Plan, it's not only the Somali government or Somali institutions, no, it is with the international community. And name it, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, say USAID, say DFID, say every institution, every international, organization and country, they are part of that, deal of the foreign aid. And I have documented all that for 7 years. Therefore, when we are drawing our national development plan, every country, almost, particularly America, Europe, say particularly, the British government, they are all involved in drawing that national development plan with us. And in that, we plan what to be done this year, next year, 3 year, 4 year, And things I can say, it's not happening. If you plan something, you can say, I will get everything. But some developments are happening. For example, now, when we look Berbera port, the DB well, invested there about $500 million, 450 million. And now the British government also, they put money in that. And the corridor and all this, and the roads are improved. Therefore, things are moving in that way. It's not recognized. But you can imagine, how many people, the British office, the British government have an office here, and they are helping, the development of Somaliland, Danida, in Denmark, they have it, Therefore, every institution and the ambassadors, they come from, say, Nairobi, and they come to Hargeisa, and they look the development and all this. Therefore, yes, we can say it's not recognized, but I think things are, happening in a way, not the way meeting all the needs, but things are happening and moving. And I tell you, with the Somalia, when we were a union or whatever you say, there was no university in Somaliland at all. People have to go to Mogadishu to get higher education. But now we have over 20 universities here, and they are linked with the international, with the other university in the world. Therefore, things are moving very, very well. And when we look, the revenue and all that, it's improving. It's improving, in fact, and the remittance also, it's helping a lot.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about the prospects for this agreement with Ethiopia. As Martin says, I don't think we've seen the fine details. And since that happened, we've seen very bellicose noises being made by all of Ethiopia and of Somaliland's foes. And that includes, obviously, the Republic of Somalia itself. it includes Egypt, it includes Djibouti and Eritrea. That's a pretty daunting prospect. Added to which, it seems that the United Arab Emirates, which, as you said, have a port investment in Hargeisa, the DP World setup, are backing Ethiopia. This looks like it could really spin out of control. What can be done to stop that, do you think?
I would like to, say objectively to answer that question. There is a long, long historical connection between Ethiopia and Somaliland. And the way I'm saying that is 1990, 1998, 88, when Somaliland cities were destroyed and there was a genocide, people without even nothing to eat, nothing to have, they ran to Ethiopia. Ethiopia people, they were very welcoming, and they treated the Somaliland people, refugees, amazingly, in a very, very humanitarian way, and helping them a lot. And that is not something which is just happening. There was a connection, trade, and business between Somaliland and Ethiopia over the centuries. Even my father, he used to have a business. I'm from Somaliland, Hargeisa, but he used to have business in Ethiopia, in Diriyaba, in Gondar, and other Somalilanders. They had that. Therefore, that connection and that understanding, it was there from years and years. Therefore, what I'm saying, this is culminating. This new agreement is going to maximize the connections between the two people to people, and the trade between the two countries is amazing.
Can I jump in, Prof, and ask you to get to the point of Patrick's question, and that is, what is the status of that agreement with Ethiopia? You've told us how it will improve ties between your two peoples, but what is the status of it at the moment?
I mean, I'm talking of just unilateral, not multilateral. When I say unilateral, I'm talking about, the agreement between Somaliland and Ethiopia. And that, the Somali government, they set up, highly skilled, committee intellectuals of Somaliland, and they put, defining and looking at, this agreement, and that's ready. And they shared that, with Ethiopia as well. I think, to my personal view, that will happen. Whenever it happens, it's going to happen.
But the legal position is that the African Union doesn't recognize Somaliland's status as an independent country, nor does the United Nations. So what is the best route in the interest of Somalilanders of changing that? Because if you just do it by some bilateral deal with Ethiopia that isn't recognized, that doesn't really help very much, does it?
No. No. I think when you say international, the legal international, I think, Somaliland have every right to decide their destination.
But you may have a moral right, but you don't have the legal right. That's the question.
When you look, say, 26 June, the British government gave, the independence of Somaliland. There wasn't any connection between Somaliland and Somalia, Italian Somalia. Therefore, this this voluntary agreement was biased. It didn't work at all, and Somaliland people have every right to decide their destination, and that's what the international, law is saying. It's written there. But when it comes to politics, that's a different thing. But when you look, say, Somalia Even they can't control, their, country. It's about 25,000, soldiers from Africa helping them, But when you come to Hargeisa, it is by the people themselves, our police, looking after our peace and all that. But how can we deal with that? Let them first sort out their situation. When it comes, to legality, there were many lawyers who are helping a lot, Somaliland, international recognition and international, legality on this. Therefore, I think it's something which we have to continue. And I tell you, Patrick, there won't be any U-turn of the Somaliland people to say we are going back to Somalia at all.
Professor Eid Ali Ahmed, I'd like to thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us from Hargeisa. We're going to move on now. Now we've got Donu. Now, President Biya, Paul Biya, this is what we want to talk about. I mean, it is a bit unseemly, isn't it, to speculate openly about the demise or otherwise of a person, but tell us why so many Cameroonians may have their champagne on ice.
Every single one of my Cameroonian friends is hoping that the president has passed on. Apart from one who's doing business with Biya's government and says she needs him to stay alive till she's collected her check. Now, it's not that they're evil and that they wish the old man bad. It's just that when somebody makes himself an obstacle to progress and sits tight for decades and nothing until that person goes, that people will say, well, if you won't move aside the civilized way, well, perhaps God will take you out for us. And I must confess that there are people who have those feelings in many African countries. And the thing with Biya is that there's clearly something wrong, because Cameroonians have been banned from speculating about what is happening, whether he's alive, dead, or just very sick on life support or whatever. And the sheer impertinence of trying to control the narrative with someone in his 90s who shouldn't be there anyway, And to be honest with you, if it was someone like Lee Kuan Yew, whom I adore, if it was someone like Lee Kuan Yew decided to stay till he was 100, then people wouldn't be wishing he was dead. But when your country is a complete mess and you still insist on being the person, you're going to have death wishes from everybody.
We're not having much luck with Donu today and our connection. All right, well, you never know. She could come back. In the meantime, though, we do have Barbara Angopa with us on a very stable line. Now, have you ever thought it strange that Tarzan, the legendary ape man who was supposedly brought up in an African jungle, that he doesn't have any African mates? Now, that's the kind of question that's being considered by Barbara and her colleague Amaka Ugwunkwo in their new podcast. It's called Hollywood Africans. It's a fascinating idea, Barbara. What gave you the idea to start a podcast that deals with the way Africans and Black people are portrayed by Hollywood?
Good question. I think there's lots of times I've watched films, and the background people, or if they're set in Africa, but the main characters are all European or Indian or anything else but Africans. And also most of the African characters just have no voice or are portrayed as very cowardly or just not very flattering. And so the idea of the podcast was to try to dig up what is the story behind the Hollywood blockbuster of the Africans there, and also what is it saying about the continent. I mean, not every single episode is going to be on that route, but many of the stories we're looking at are of the films which have white or any other race characters as the foreground, and then the servants in the background, the people carrying things in the background, what's their story? That's how we had the idea. And I got that just by watching an old Tarzan episode. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's probably, my grandfather was someone like that, or could have been. But what was his story?
Right. Okay. So you look at Tarzan and you think to yourself, as a small girl, I presume, when you first watched Tarzan, like most of us, what was the thing that struck you most about watching? It would have been one of those early versions, because of course it's been redone a gazillion times, hasn't it?
I'm very fascinated to why it's been remade so many times. The first time I watched Tarzan was, I think I was 8 years old, and we just moved from Uganda to the UK. It was the civil war at the time, and we moved for safety to the UK. But I just noticed that all the black people in Tarzan were portrayed as very cowardly. And I thought, why are they terrified of animals and stuff when they've been surviving all this for centuries? And yet, Tarzan, this person who's not even brought up by humans, who's brought up by apes, can can somehow sort everything out, whether it's falling into a river, he's the one who saves everybody, so on and so forth. And I just found it fascinating. And that's how I got hooked to finding out the backstory of all those cowardly Africans.
And also, he didn't really have, if I remember, he didn't really have any social interaction any substantial basis with Africans. They're just bit part players in the background. Am I right?
Has absolutely no African friends. And in fact, I think he murders one in the first episode. I mean, in the first ever Tarzan, the 1932 Tarzan, the Ape Man. He does a one-handed drowning of an African person, a straggling person in an expedition party, because one of his family members, who is the ape family, has been killed. The whole point of the podcast, or just how we try to retell the story, is who were these people? One, they were not cowardly at all. They were surviving a lot. I mean, on a personal note, my own great-grandfather was actually killed by a hyena because he was trying to defend his cattle at night, it was a hyena attack. He was bitten in the leg and died soon after that. And that's just a story that stayed in the family for a long time. But we never saw him as a coward. He was a hero. He was trying to defend the family. But that's not how people who were falling off boats in Tarzan, or being thrown to other wild animals, or carrying things, and as part of an expedition party carrying supplies, are portrayed. They're portrayed as somehow hapless, cowardly, and that's how the story. We just try to retell it from the other side.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Barbara. I think, Donu, did you want to jump in on this? I saw you.
Well, first of all, that was nearly 100. That was like 100 years ago. Have things improved since then? That's one question I'd like to ask. I also wonder if you've heard this joke. It's in rather bad taste, but it made me laugh. You know, this habit of casting Black people and Asian people in roles that would traditionally have been given to whites in programs like Bridgerton, and there's talk of, for example, making James Bond, the next James Bond, a Black man like Idris Elba. Somebody said the one thing that they wouldn't dare recast and subject to colorblind casting is Tarzan, because Hollywood studios would not have the courage to cast a Black man swinging from branch to branch like a monkey. So I thought that was really funny, because, what do you think about that? Is it funny?
I think Really, that's absolutely true. I don't think they would. But I've always thought, I mean, I've never, shamefully, I've never actually read the books, Tarzan.
No, because they're rubbish. That's why they're widely known to be rubbish.
I've never actually read any Tarzan ever, but the way I see it, I think Tarzan, for the people who were making it, was a way of trying to talk about Black people without saying that it's saying to look, they're savage, they don't really wear clothes. There was something on one of the original adverts, it said Tarzan only knows the law of the jungle or something like that. And I think it's a way, it was a foil to just talk about African people without actually without appearing racist, because the main character is actually white and, in fact, aristocratic, a European aristocrat who somehow finds his way to Africa and also is at the top of the social chain there. And despite being brought up by apes and everything. But as for the second question you asked about recasting certain films, my personal opinion, I think that you need to find more films about actual Africans. It shouldn't always be we must recast Ariel as a Black person, or we must recast. I studied history, and it just gets a bit jarring. I mean, I did like Bridgerton. It was the first series, but it was just jarring, and it's rewriting history. And I think we should just. My personal opinion is that we could find our own stories, even in the diaspora, and tell those stories.
I totally agree. In fact, it reeks of what I call wannabe. It makes Black people look as if their dream is to play white roles, instead of finding interesting stories of our own, of which there are many.
But Barbara, Spike Lee is one of my favorite directors, and he's been making films for now, 35 years. And just, I mean, a lot of his films, She's Gotta Have It, Mo Better Blues, Do the Right Thing. They're great films to watch. The storyline is fantastic. The characters are brilliant. The music is often, incredible. But they do have a point to them. And I'm wondering how many other filmmakers are making movies that are commercially successful like Spike Lee's, but also have a point to them.
That's a good question. I think that the film industry has changed a lot. It's no longer driven by the massive studios anymore, like all the streaming networks like Netflix, Apple, Hulu, all of these have upset the traditional Hollywood. And I do think there are some interesting films and series being made. But you have to, I think there's also almost too much. I've seen lots of, for example, on Apple TV, there's loads and loads of interesting sci-fi, which I think has actually been brilliant for African or Black actors, because it's set so far in the future, you don't know what the future's going to be like. So you can do anything with a character. I mean, of course, you can refer back, but you can do anything with a character, and it's just given them a way to cast different minorities generally, not just African people. But also, I think the way that African people are portrayed in like the most recent blockbusters, things like there is one really funny one, Beast, with Idris Elba. I mean, that was quite, I think that, I'm not sure if that was a hit or not, but I just watched it for the show anyway, for Hollywood Africans. That's going to be in our next series. But they do refer back to what many films about Africa were about, which is it's always on safari, and then something goes wrong because there's a beast. And then, of course, there's Black Panther. That was supposed to be. I suppose that falls into the whole sci-fi category where you thinking into the future and what it could be like, and then it's a blank canvas, so you can portray African people in loads of different ways. And The Woman King, that one was also rewriting history a bit, but that was a big blockbuster. I think Hollywood will always do what has to do to get people to stay in the cinema. And at the moment, I think movements like Me Too influence the writing, and so they will have women portrayed in a certain way, or they may not be 100% accurate.
But I was just thinking, you mentioned Spike Lee, Patrick, but also the Jordan Peels and the Tyler Perrys. There are more and more well-established Black directors. And so isn't it incumbent upon Black filmmakers to actually influence the whole Hollywood scene just by their presence, just by producing and shaping the narrative in a way, because that's what we can do. We're tired of constantly being presented as kind of servile add-ons, extras who are either mammies or butlers.
But that's why I was so surprised by Bridgerton, because it's actually produced by a Black woman, the brilliant Shonda Rhimes. And I would have thought that, being as creative as she is, she wouldn't go down that path of aping white people through Black actors, and just find something completely original that was about Black people, real Black people.
Maybe costume dramas make money, and that's what she thought.
Well, you can have a costume drama with Black people. I mean, for example, the Black people in the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th centuries, you don't have to cast a Black person as the Duke of Hastings in England to make it interesting, Anyway, that's just my view. I expected more of Shonda, and I'm a great fan of hers.
But then so many people watched it, so it's definitely feeding a need. So we have to ask ourselves, what is that need? What is that? One of these? I don't know. And there's probably more down the line. I don't see Bridgerton being axed anytime soon.
It's the wannabe need. It's the wannabe need.
Do you feel that there is a bigger push towards Black people taking control of their own film industries?
I think there's a willingness to, but it's the organisation. Like I know at the moment, there's Idris Elba is behind. They've bought the rights, and I think are trying to make things fall apart. And I think, I'm not sure if it's going to be, definitely because as things fall apart, it's going to be an entirely Black cast, and it's also a very well-known book, and this, I think it's already been made before. So I think and I think that just because it has Idris Elba as the lead is going to be huge.
I think that's fine, Barbara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that ends this edition of Africa Here and Now. Please subscribe and share our YouTube channel. We're in a battle with the algorithm. You can really help. You can get all our episodes on the website, www.AfricaHere&NOW.com. We're available on all the major audio platforms, as well as on your smart speaker. And don't forget the socials. We're on Facebook, Insta and X. I'm at Martine Dennis. Get in touch. We recorded this on Friday, the 18th of October, 2024. Our producer is Anne Busby. Our original music is by Enric Adam, Moses Abuye, and Charlie Panton put it all together. To our guests, thank you, Professor Eid Ali Ahmed and Barbara Ngopa. From Patrick, Donu and me, thank you for your company.